Okay, welcome everybody to the fourth and final webinar in our series of conservation team webinars for the winter of 2023. Welcome. You are invited to put your name and county where you live in, and so we can get a feeling for where we all are and maybe connect with people after. So just to put this in context, the Sierra Club has 8 chapter conservation teams in Pennsylvania. This graphic kind of shows their relationship. We have conservation teams focused on dirty and clean energy, air and water quality, transportation, public lands, food and agriculture, and zero waste. I mean, don't get too caught up on the overlapping aspects of this, but as you know, everything is connected to everything else. So these teams are trying to focus on these issues at a statewide level, or at least developing resources so people can work on these issues in their local areas. So various of these teams are collaborating to host educational webinars. This is one of them about methane, fugitive methane emissions in the US and Pennsylvania. And so you guys know how Zoom works. I think you all came in on mute. Please stay on mute. You're welcome to put any questions you have in the chat, but we'll have plenty of time after the presentations to have a discussion and have some Q&A. So I'll introduce our speakers. Kelsey Krepps is a senior campaign representative with the Sierra Club Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign, which is a diverse climate movement to stop the expansion of dirty fuels, fossil fuels, infrastructure projects, bring about a safer climate future, and help to open a path for clean, renewable energy. And also we've invited Emily Davis, who is a longtime volunteer and friend of mine in the Southeast Pennsylvania group, and now with Geodelphia, a team promoting network geothermal heating and air conditioning in the Philadelphia area. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and ask Kelsey to take over.
All right, y'all. Is everybody seeing that? Can I get a thumbs up from some folks? Perfect. Thanks, y'all.
Good.
I have a couple of slides that I'm going to skip right through here because we know Zoom at this point. If anybody needs any help with anything, please reach out in the chat and we will do our best to get to you on that. We're talking about Methane Madness and it's March. And so for those of y'all who are filling out your brackets for basketball, we thought it would kind of be a helpful tool to kind of learn about what the methane breakdown is in the US in a fun way that still gets to, the point of this issue, and that methane is emitting from a variety of sources at a lot of times, and it's very harmful. So I just wanted to it's a helpful learning tool. Jim, you came off mute here. Do you want to say anything about the bracket?
Yeah, I forgot to talk about with you guys. Let's do that first bracket now, okay? Just while we're cold. All right.
While y'all are here, let's get settled. Take some time here. Take a look at this bracket. In the northern bracket, we've got coal mining versus manure management. In the southern bracket, we've got ruminant animal digestions, and so that's like your cows and things like buffalo and versus rice cultivation. In our eastern bracket, we've got natural gas systems versus wastewater treatment. And in our western bracket, we've got petroleum systems versus landfills. So y'all can take some time here and figure out who do you think is in this poll here is winning in the eastern bracket. But
so just take a minute and click on one of those, and I'll put the next bracket up in just I'll say 20 seconds. Oh, 20 seconds is already done. So I'll say a minute. And I'll just note that we did make a distinction between petroleum systems and gas systems.
This one's the close one.
All right, thank you. Let's bring up the second one. Or do that back. There's a north bracket, coal versus manure. Coal mining, not coal burning, coal mining.
Results are rolling in. Whose bracket's gonna come out on top?
Oh, we should have prepared some commercials during this competition.
I can do a quick commercial if that would be helpful. I know that is a big thing amongst all of us that we all need to drink more water. So this is a water commercial and a water break. I encourage everybody here on the call to take a good sip of their water if they've got it.
Okay, here's the southern bracket, fracked gas versus wastewater. And I purposely didn't include the seeding because that might bias people about which is the favorite here. But we'll see if our interpretation is the same as what the EPA says at the end. Okay, we've already got 19. You guys are getting better at this. And the last one is the western bracket. Animals versus rice, which I was surprised to see on the chart, but there it is.
Almost there, I feel like.
There we go. All right, good. I am not going to share the results now. I will put up the semifinals after Emily speaks. Okay. Thank you all.
And before that, just really quickly, I'm going to give a quick little overview of what we're talking about when we're having this issue. A lot of times folks like to use the words natural gas as if it's like it's kind of talked about as if it's clean. And in reality, natural gas is primarily methane, which is a really potent and dangerous greenhouse gas, and should be more accurately called methane gas or fossil gas. In the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, methane was actually highlighted as a particular concern because it has an outsized impact on the climate, meaning that the gas that makes up a tiny fraction of our atmosphere, which is CO2 or carbon dioxide, levels are more than 200 times higher. But in the first 20 years after release, methane is around 80 times more powerful than CO2 at trapping heat in Earth's atmosphere, making our need to reduce our methane emissions a top priority for us to avert the worst of the climate crisis. So that is just, I wanted to give that context here in terms of that global warming potential and what's being contributed to the climate crisis. Oh, apologies, y'all. Did that just switch my screen? Are we still on the slide deck, y'all? I'm sorry. Can y'all still see the slides? And now it's on life cycles of fracked gas.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. For me, it opened up the link that I have in here. And just so folks know, I have everything linked from resources and other stuff on that side. So apologies on that. I wanted to show this graphic here. This is from a report that Sierra Club has. And if I know it's kind of hard to see, so apologies on that. It's smaller, it's a little hard to see. But any single time that you see that little red squiggle, above a piece of this graphic, just know that that's where methane is leaking. And natural gas is leaking when a well is drilled, when a well is fracked, when that gas is processed, when the extracted gas is compressed into pipelines. That's also a place where this is leaking. And as well as anywhere from underground storage. When it's being transported, it's also leaking methane. And in a distribution sense, and it's various end uses. In here we have power plants, methanol and petrochemicals, liquefied natural gas or LNG facilities, industrial and manufacturing, business and commercial uses, and residential uses. So it's even hard for me to read on the screen there for y'all. But these are all different areas where methane is leaking in the system from beginning to end, and you'll get to see some of that. And I'll also add in here too, that methane is also leaking from wells that haven't been properly taken care of. And that's a section of this work that I'm going to be kind of talking about later on. But we'll get into a few more pieces of this. I just wanted to give folks this overview that at every single point of the supply chain and life cycle flow of fracked gas, methane is leaking. And so we're going to get a little bit more into the details of that. But soon we're going to show some bracket results, y'all. And then we'll turn it over to Emily here to talk about Philadelphia and Geodelphia. Okay, how did your brackets do? Who did you have winning in here? From coal mining and manure management, we have manure management coming out of the northern bracket. In the southern bracket for ruminant animal digestion and rice cultivation, you've got animal digestion. From gas extraction and transport, you've got, and wastewater treatment, you've got gas extraction. From petroleum systems and landfills, you have landfills. So I think, Jim, are you going to open up another poll for us here to get into?
I'm going to do it after Emily speaks. So
okay, sounds good.
Thank you for that. But I don't have my tabulations complete yet.
Okay, sounds good. And in that case, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As you know, if you're in Philadelphia, we have lots of gas leaks. And Sierra Club helped to fund a project for us to look at some of the leaks in Philadelphia. And this is a map of the leaks that have been where our driver drove, and the red dots are the leaks. If you want to see more about this and check out what's going on in your neighborhood, if any of these paths here are around your neighborhood, you can scroll down a little bit further on this website and you'll find a place where you can expand it and actually click on links to do that. This is at geodelphia.org. And after I'm done, I can put that in the chat so you know for sure. So anyway, there are lots of leaks. Kelsey, can you move to the next slide? I want to talk a little bit about the history of gas in Philadelphia beforehand, because the Philadelphia Gas Works is actually pretty old. 1836, as you can see there. They started with lighting just on 2nd Street and expanded from there. They put in a whole bunch, 60 miles of it, for the Centennial Exposition in 1876, and even introduced cooking with gas there. But it wasn't until the 70s that heating came in. So it's actually a relatively new thing. It's only in the last quarter of their history that they've actually been selling gas for heat, or a lot of it at any rate. And right now that's their major source of income. So the business model has changed over the year, and we at Geodelphia think that it ought to change again, and they ought to start being Philadelphia Geothermal Works instead of Gas Works, but that's yet to come. Next slide, Kelsey. Okay, gas leaks everywhere. This is a picture taken from that same place. And you can see we're looking south toward the Delaware River. So this is basically South Philadelphia. And gas leaks everywhere. My dad thought the sphincter muscle was really amazing, a valve that can control solids, liquids, and gases. But we all know that, like gas pipes, the sphincter is not perfect. Philadelphia PGW acknowledges that it loses 2.7% of its gas due to leaks each year. That means that over 2 million cubic feet of gas leak into Philadelphia's air, the greenhouse gas equivalent of 120,000 cars. This does not include leaks that include inside your home or inside buildings on the other side of the meter. This is the stuff that's lost to Philadelphia, to PGW, what they can't sell because it's in our air. PGW also reported fixing 1,798 hazardous leaks in 2021. The leaks that are pictured here are not hazardous. They're just happening. And there are lots of them. So they've got hazardous. They also know that they need to replace 1,715 miles of at-risk pipes, and that procedure will cost more than $1 billion. We can think of some better things that they can do with that $1 billion. And it'll take as much as 30 years, well past the 2050 date when the city says it's going to have all clean, green energy and a zero carbon footprint. At any rate, many of these leaks occur in the old cast iron pipes, some of them dating back to the very early part of the history. Some of this gas doesn't actually get into the air, but permeates the soil and replaces the oxygen that's in the soil and kills street trees. So if you've ever seen a tree pit that's been filled several times and the tree always dies, it might be gas. In 2021, Bob Ackley drove his gas sniffing vehicle. He's from Gas Safety around this small portion, or the portion of the city that you saw before, and detected 1,001 leaks. As I said, none of these leaks were hazardous. And this picture here uses Google Earth and Bob's data to make this picture. Next slide. These pictures were taken by Melissa Ostroff, and they are at 5th and Fitzwater in Philadelphia. This is South Philadelphia, so it's a closer look. She used an optical gas imaging camera to take this picture of the leak that's coming out of the manhole. That apparently wasn't the only leak. They tried to patch that one up. Is Melissa on the call? I don't know what. Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about your process here, Melissa?
Sure. Yeah, this was just pure coincidence of living in a part of Philadelphia where we had a chronic gas leak, and PGW spent a lot of time jackhammering in the street trying to find the source of the leak and trying to patch it up. And they were not successful. Unfortunately, it just kept coming back. And eventually I started capturing footage of it with an optical gas imaging camera that I use for my job at Earthworks. Typically, I look at gas leaks and emissions coming from the other side of the supply chain. So more on where it's being produced in Southwest Pennsylvania or other parts of the state. But this was right outside of my apartment in Queen Village in Philadelphia. And I realized that I could also see the gas leaks here. It's the same thing. That's it's methane that's coming out here as what we see coming from the well sites themselves. And eventually, this was right next to Meredith Elementary School. And given that PGW's attempts to patch it up really didn't work, I ended up advocating for my neighborhood association to try to convince PGW to replace this gas main because the patchwork attempts weren't working, and they have replaced it. Now I don't live at that corner. I live in a different part of South Philadelphia. And of course, I still smell gas leaks outside sometimes, and have actually even found a gas leak inside my home here in South Philadelphia at the gas meter itself using this camera. So I mean, it's invisible. So if you were walking down, like this guy who's skating down the street here had no idea there was a plume of methane coming up there. But for those of us that live in Philadelphia, you know what it smells like. You definitely, it's not uncommon. So we are surrounded by this kind of thing, unfortunately.
Wow, thanks a whole lot for taking over there. That was a great introduction. Can you click onto the next slide so we can take a closer look at Melissa's neighborhood? Okay, I wanted to explain a little bit about Bob's data. Click again. And we should see that's Fitzwater Street. And then click again, and there's Merida School that was pictured. And I don't know whether this picture was taken or this measurement was taken before or after you did your work, Melissa, but you can see they're nice big spikes. Yeah,
this corresponded with some of the time where I was capturing footage. So when I saw this map afterwards, it definitely matched up with what I was seeing. Yep.
I see somebody in the chat asks about completing this thing. We had hoped to raise enough money to complete the study of the entire city. Supposedly PGW has done this, but they don't share their data. And we wanted to make this data public. But it costs about $100,000 and we're way short of that goal. I want to explain a little bit about these green dots. Each of those green dots is a leak, and you can look at Bob's data. Can you click to the next slide? Okay, so if you click on one of those green dots, sometimes you'll see a fan out of a whole bunch of them, and you can click on one of those. But this is the data, and I can't tell you very much about most of it. I know that the date is wrong. He didn't apparently put his date in at the top because he did not do this on New Year's Day. He did it sometime between June and July because we contracted in June and we paid him in July. But on this little data sheet, the number one reading there is his, oh, they don't quite come out. The one that's in the middle there, that's his actual reading. The one that's below it, that's circled, is the background. And the one that's above it is the actual reading. So that's how you would read it. So this one that just says CH4 or methane, that's the actual reading there. And if you go to the Geodelphia site, you can click on those dots and find out what's going on, maybe closer to you. So we've got a lot of gas leaks in Philadelphia. Can you click to the next slide, my last slide? While infrequent, gas explosions in homes can be catastrophic. This one is in South Philadelphia, and it happened in 2019 and destroyed 5 homes and killed 2. The cause was just like on Melissa's Street. It was a leak in a pipe, and apparently the gas found its way into the home. And then I don't think that they know exactly what caused the explosion. There was another one in 2021 that injured 3 people, but in 2011, a PGW worker was actually killed and 6 more injured in an explosion in the Tacony neighborhood. The workers had already been there reported by the smell of gas. They arrived and they evacuated the folks from the home and were apparently opening windows to disperse the gas when it exploded. A electric gas starter had apparently gone off and set off the explosion. But homes provide nice enclosed spaces and give gas a good chance to explode. And that's where I'm going to start and let Kelsey pick back up. Oh, brackets.
No, I just stopped the slideshow just for a second here, so I can go back to the slide that Jim was going to talk about real quick.
Thank you, Melissa, for stepping in and explaining that much better than I can.
No problem. Thanks for sharing it with everyone.
Apologies, y'all.
All right, while Kelsey's doing that, I'm going to bring up the results. I think Kelsey will show underneath this. So in the eastern bracket, petroleum oil wins out over landfills. See if that matches our brackets. Oh, she had landfills from EPA data advancing. Interesting. And then in the northern bracket, why can't I see? Do you see that? Do you see the northern bracket there?
No,
I don't see the results showing up in
Oh.
the poll.
Interesting. It only let me do one of them.
You gotta close it maybe, the eastern bracket?
Are you
I can
still?
stop
I
sharing.
see. Stop sharing. Yep.
Ah,
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you. And there's the northern where we had manure beating coal. Yes, that matches the EPA data. And then we have the southern bracket. We have gas beating wastewater, which of course is, but wastewater is not as small as you would think. We'll see in the final brackets. And then the western is grazing animals being out rice cultivation. All right, now I'm gonna share the semifinals. So here's, please contribute to this poll. Manure management versus gas extraction and transportation. If you guys can click on that poll, 5, 6, 7. We had 19 in the first round, so try to get close to 19 for this. All right, 18, we'll stop it there. And semifinal B is petroleum oil versus animal grazing. I think might be a tough one. Could be a buzzer beater. The crowd is going crazy. All right, very good. Thank you. Oh, we got 21 votes this time. All right, I will tabulate those results and share them after Kelsey talks, and we'll have the finals. Go ahead, Kelsey. You can just zoom through Emily's slides.
Sounds good. I'm actually going to skip a slide in here since we can't show the results ahead of time. But hey, y'all. Kelsey Krepps, as Jim introduced me in the beginning here, senior campaign rep with Dirty Fuels campaign from Sierra Club. I'm going to talk about some unexpected methane emitters that we kind of don't really think about as often when we're talking about methane coming from the state of Pennsylvania specifically. We can think of the frac cycle, and we can think of how gas is currently coming to and from homes or for export, or a lot of the things that we typically think about when it comes to the fracking world. But one of the things to kind of keep in mind that I do a lot of my work is thinking about those legacy wells that we have. Pennsylvania is a historically extractive state. It's not just an extractive state now. It has been for a very long time. And basically, because of that and how many wells were drilled in this state from more of the shallow gas industry and oil over time, those wells were left within the landscapes of Pennsylvania without proper cleanup. And so a lot of times we're finding them and they're improperly plugged. And so sometimes they're leaking a lot of methane gases that we've been talking about here. threatening our communities and our health and our environment in very similar ways that we've already discussed here today. And I know, like I said, we talk about this in the frac cycle. It's a little bit more understandable when it comes to a more modern day thought process here. And that's what I shared in that first couple of slides here. But when we think of orphaned and abandoned wells, so orphaned wells are those legacy wells that I was talking about, and abandoned wells are wells that gas have viable owners that the owners have put back onto the state of Pennsylvania. And as you can see from this map here, there's a lot of them that DEP knows about. And then there are plenty more that have not been found because of just when the time period was that they were drilled. And so the estimates range from anywhere from 200,000 wells within Pennsylvania to upwards of 700,000. And that's a lot. Apologies, y'all. It's doing that. It didn't move from the slide. Yes, cool. Okay, apologies. Every single time I click on a graphic that I've put in here, it's opening up a link for me in my browsers. So just know that everything is linked within the slide deck of my slides here. So one of the reasons that we keep talking about why these wells are an issue, these legacy wells and these wells that are unplugged from oil and gas companies, is that they are leaking methane. And again, it's exactly why we talked about this particular issue today. There are other issues that come with leaking methane as well. When it mixes with other elements within the environment, it can cause a lot of problems for your water supplies. It can cause gas leaks in mixing and cause other things, like we were talking about, explosions. It can decrease your property values, and overall the costs fall back on us as taxpayers because of the inadequate funding to actually take care of this issue. And then while there are federal dollars now, we are still dealing with this at a scale that is going to take a very long time to clean up. So there was a study done when I was actually in school. I actually got to witness Dr. Kang doing some of the methane measurements from abandoned oil and gas wells up when I was at Pitt Bradford's campus, the Pitt campus that's up in Bradford, Pennsylvania. And it during this study, it was accounted for that these abandoned oil and gas wells are actually emitting around 8% of Pennsylvania's emissions. And that's like a significant number considering that we don't know where these things are. So we can't fix them. We can't mitigate this sort of situation until we know the full scale, can find them. And they're constantly doing this. So it's also not like a situation like a valved kind of conversation. This is not a turning on and turning off or a solution. It's something that's happening constantly. So I just wanted to share that with folks, that this is a significant portion of Pennsylvania's emissions. And then overall, I wanted to share this Environmental Defense Fund study that talks about low producing wells. And so this is talking about wells that are not producing, that are producing low amounts of oil and gas across the US. So this is getting into oil, but it also still includes our gas conversations. That are actually a significant, they produce just 6% of our nation's fossil fuels, but they are a huge portion of our emissions in the US. And gosh darn it, sorry, it's doing that thing for me every single time I click on the actual slide. So y'all can see here that the Appalachian region where Pennsylvania is located is one of the worst low producing well productions by region. And actually Melissa has also worked with me and over here in Western Pennsylvania, and we came upon a low producing well within public park that was emitting a lot of really harmful methane and other VOCs last summer during an outing that we did. So it's great, Melissa, to have you on here to even be able to point to that particular well site. But I wanted to talk, about these particular issues as well. So when we're thinking about methane, we're thinking about its leaking in every part of the frac cycle. We're thinking about its distribution, it's leaking. We're thinking about in our cities, it's leaking. We're thinking about in our homes. We're thinking about even our legacy pollution and our legacy issues in this state. And also, so yeah, I just wanted to say this is a huge problem, and one that, yeah, where everybody here is kind of working to mitigate and work on and advocate against. And there are rules moving forward at the federal level that I know many of us have interacted with and played a part in sending in comments. But I did just want to say that there's movement happening in terms of making stronger regulations on this issue. But overall, it's still a huge problem until we transition from gas. And on that note, I think I'm going to head back to the results of the bracket here. Jim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay. So semifinal A, gas extraction beats manure management. That should be pretty obvious. And semifinal B, animal grazing nudges out petroleum and oil systems. And that results gives us a final of, here's a poll that you can contribute to: gas versus animal grazing. Please vote.
The
And
final
don't-
poll, the final match, the NCAA tournament has come to its conclusion. Who is going to win here? If you couldn't tell from our presentation.
All right, so that's 21. I'll end it and I can share the results. Overwhelmingly, people thought gas extraction was the winner. What does the data show, Kelsey?
Are y'all able to see my screen? It is. It's natural gas systems. So whoever voted for that into the poll, congratulations, your bracket. Hopefully somewhere along the lines it didn't get too messed up and you're still making your bets. I just wanted to share just where we pulled some of this data from to end this for y'all before we jump over to questions, but wanted to, and some announcements from Jim, but we did pull some of this data from the 2020 EPA source, as well as this 2019 energy in-depth source. So I wanted to just share where we got these from and this kind of idea to do this bracket work, just pulling from these, and they're linked in the slide. So Jim, I think I'm going to put it on the question slide and turn it over back to you.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've kept up with questions in the chat, but I'm just going to invite people to raise their hand or come off mute. Yeah, Kelsey, why don't you stop sharing so that we can see people's faces and see people raise their hands. Yeah, go ahead, Corinne. Can you come off mute, Corinne?
Oh, yes, I can do that. So my question is, why are the emissions from petroleum so much lower?
So my guess would be that petroleum oil is already in a liquid state, and it doesn't want to, or it's not pressurized coming out of the ground, right? Wouldn't you say that, Kelsey?
Yeah. And if it's leaking, it's more obvious?
No, so methane is gas,
Yeah.
right? But oil is the liquid.
Yeah.
So when you're mining the liquid out of the ground, you do have some residual methane leakage, but it's not necessarily as much as when you're actually drilling for
Or the gas. Okay.
for the gas.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Corinne?
Hi. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is the screenshot of the camera in South Philly taking images of leaks matched with the screenshot of dots where there's also a map of leaks. Is this information something that Sierra Club could comfortably share with public radio, a Philadelphia journalist? I just think that it's the kind of information that lots of people would benefit from knowing about.
I guess I can answer that one. We've already shared it with WHYY. They have the raw data. So they've been looking at it, and they actually put a very nice article together a few months ago about some of these leaks. So it is available, and it's available on the Geodelphia website.
Okay, I'll put that Geodelphia website in the chat.
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Pat wants to know why the mapping wasn't done in Roxborough, or you've got Germantown, but not Roxborough. Was it fairly random what streets he picked?
Yes, it was fairly random. We were actually hoping to find some big leaks around some politicians' homes. So we kind of picked out where people lived and said, Bob, do this. So it was rather random.
Right. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, hey, I put this in the chat, but what's the relative size of relative carbon emissions for all this leakage upstream of when you burn, say, a cubic foot of gas in your house? Do you have a feel for that?
Wow, good question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm like I think it's just my brain right now, but can we follow up with you? And ask that question into other spaces?
Yeah, I think I have a reference, which, yeah, I could probably send to you. I think someone has looked at this actually, but I'd have to dig it up.
Off the
Okay.
top of my head, I don't have an answer.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Garrett asked if he wanted to initiate a study like this, a leakage study in his town. Who would he contact? Emily, could you find contact? It doesn't have to be now, but follow up with Garrett.
Yeah,
Bob
I'll
to
try to see if
study?
I can find it now.
Okay.
I might be able to, but it's Bob Ackley at gassafety.ing or whatever in Boston.
Okay.
And somewhere I have his contact information, but I'm not sure if I can find it quickly.
It's not going to be cheap, but it's
It's not cheap.
even if
Definitely
sampling
not.
is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, Kelsey, this is a great presentation, and you may be getting to this point, but my question is a compound one. Is it just the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that is tasked with closing these wells? Are there any resources outside of the Pennsylvania government that can and could address this?
I can speak to this a little bit. Yeah. So I will say both the DEP has an orphaned well plugging program where they get some funds from well permits that goes towards this program. So there is a bit of that of tracking of the plugging, but what's really incredible is that the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act actually covered a significant portion of funding to take care of this issue. I can follow up with more information there, but it's essentially so much money that would help really address and kind of start the snowball issue of taking care of this. of this particular issue in Pennsylvania, just because, like I said, we have so much of a legacy problem here with this. We've been an extractive state for a very long time. And so cleaning up that particular legacy is a portion of what that funding is going to go to. I will say a lot of my work, and for those of y'all who haven't heard me say my spiel on this issue, is that it's really helpful funding. It's really helpful that DEP is administering these contracts because of this funding, and it's really starting this whole program in the state, which is desperately needed. But one of the issues is that we still have, and if folks saw the recent DEP report on the conventional industry, so that shallow gas industry that I kind of mentioned at one point, they just recently released a report at the end of December that talked about the culture of non-compliance within that industry, and just how often those companies are abandoning their wells back to the state. And so they're essentially giving them back, not giving them back, apologies, putting that burden on us as taxpayers and back on the state, and being added to lists that are already long. And one of the ways of which my work is hoping to address this is to raise the bond amounts for those wells, which is, a financial assurance that says that company is in good standing and has the money. And here it is. If that company were to go bankrupt, the state would at least have some money to plug it versus having nothing, and just a well that's leaking, and us to take care of it as taxpayers. So that was a very long-winded answer, and I apologize, but I can definitely get you information on this issue if that's something that you would like to learn more about as well.
Okay, thanks, Kelsey. There was a question in the chat about whether it's possible to get the data from PGW. Emily mentioned that PGW had done leak testing, but they haven't shared it. Is it possible has anybody tried to do a Freedom of Information Act request? I don't know if you know that, Emily, or does anybody know it? I put you on mute, Emily, because there was some background noise.
And I'll just say, I don't know that information because that came from Melissa. So I don't know anything about that, but Emily might. Emily, you're still on mute, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't know whether that's available. I know that the Facilities Management Corporation, which is the board of PGW, has been sued for privacy, and the state Supreme Court said they were supposed to share under the Sunshine Law, but it's never happened, as far as I know. If anybody else can answer that, go ahead.
So it sounds like maybe something worth a try. I think next up is Mike.
Yes, thank you for an informative presentation. I was going to ask about, I was struck by a number of details, one of which was, how much of these abandoned wells are actually owned by big companies, like 76%, if I recall the statistic I saw. So, I mean, obviously companies have been neglecting cleanup for their business operations for years. This is nothing new. But I'm wondering, is there a lot of this, like was mentioned, is being handed off to the taxpayer, but I'm wondering, is there any legal initiatives right now to try to get companies? I don't know if NDRC or any of the environmental justice are doing any things that we can sort of help out or advocate for.
I can share, yes. And I can also share that pieces of this as well would be one of the biggest things that I can think of, like, for example, that we could be advocating for in the short term. For those of y'all who tuned in to Governor Shapiro's budget address last week, the DEP budget is more than we've seen it in a long time. And so And that's a really key piece of going after folks who are violators and who are constant violators, is like that mechanism. So advocating for DEP funding and staff to do some of that is a big piece of that puzzle. And so I'll just say that that's a constant issue. And outside of that, holding folks accountable, I would love to follow up because I'm doing that. And so that's a lot of my work and a lot of my time on this issue. So if it was Mike, apologies, because I'm seeing the MDADAMO on your Zoom. So if it was Mike, I'd love to follow up and have a chat with you about it for sure.
Okay, great. How should we do that?
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I'll put everybody's email address at the end of this.
Okay.
Thing. Lisa, you had a question?
Take me last.
Okay. Kelly?
Hi, thank you guys. Kelsey, a couple of questions. So the number one was the natural gas. How much does Pennsylvania put into that US total as a state? Because those were US numbers, yes?
Yeah, we're the
Yeah.
second producer of natural gas. And I think, gosh, in the rankings, I actually do think we're second in emissions as well. Let me just double check on that really quickly, because off the top of my head, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Okay. So we're second in the US for methane, the oil, the gas, the abandoned wells, plus the other wells and stuff like that. So
For well abandonment, again, I would have to just double check on that particular issue, but we're very high. And it also will say so that 8% was from our emissions for the state. But I will say when it came to that Appalachian stretch, if you go to that report, there will be more information there in terms of like what Pennsylvania contributes. But overall, Appalachia has a very large portion of those low producing wells that are high emitters. And that's, so I just so Pennsylvania contributes a lot, I will say.
I think that's, you're looking at the top two producers, that oil, the methane gas as the wells and the ruminant, right? The animals. And we talk about like, what's our job to lower our methane and thinking about being vegetarian and plant-based and stuff like that. And how do we get more people involved in that? So there's so many different ways you can use the data that you gave today. So thank you very much on that. And I have talked to my husband a lot about the methane release because he's a climate scientist. And so we're talking about, you're looking at, we're trying to reduce our greenhouse gases or the, carbon equivalent by 2030, by 2040, and how these numbers are more prevalent in that short-term analysis instead of that long-term, the 100 years that we've been always talking about. Now methane is like crucial in how we lower that as soon as possible to get our greenhouse gases fixed and stuff like that. So lots to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Jim.
So, yeah, I just want to say what's crazy. This is just money, spilling into the atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
The leakage in Philadelphia. This is product that they're not selling.
Yeah.
It is not going through a meter.
Nope. Yeah.
Dave Roberts, you had a question?
Yes. So with the fracking industry, one of the things that they've been talking about, to mitigate, carbon, is sequestration, pumping the carbon back into the ground. And I'm just wondering if there's been any studies on, how that would affect some of these leaks, and is that in any way feasible, as a real mitigation?
Good question.
I think that's a really good question. And it's something that a lot of groups are actually kind of trying to figure out right now. I don't think it's necessarily I think when it comes to this issue, a lot of times the solutions come at the forms of new technology or new ways to do things instead of reducing our reliance on the actual issue. And so I think that it's kind of hard, and it sends a lot of us who are in these spaces working on figuring out, well, is this the new solution? Is this the sort of I think there's a phrase for this, like the silver bullet. Is this the silver bullet that's going to fix our problem? And a lot of the times, it's a technology that we haven't developed as fully as we'd like, or it's going to impact communities in ways that we don't know yet. And so I would say overall, like for Sierra Club, and feel free anybody else here to weigh in on this, is that this is an ongoing topic of a lot of spaces of like what that looks like, and pushing back on just some of those kinds of solutions, when in reality, like our lessening our reliance on this gas is actually kind of the full circle aspect of it. So Jim, I don't know if you have anything else to say on that particular issue.
I do not. I just want to raise this one question from Richard. If you could talk a little more about the problem of companies that own these wells that have become abandoned, and they have gone to bankruptcy, and who really holds the liability for those? Is there anything more you can say about that?
It sometimes, I mean, with bankruptcy cases, I will say that there's like lots of bankruptcy like processes. And so it kind of depends on like the agreements that are set forth afterwards. And so, for example, companies can go bankrupt, but they can still be held accountable for plugging their wells at different times, or all of those wells fall back to the state, depending on how the processing and procedure moves forward. So it kind of is dependent on the particular situation. And I'm not a bankruptcy like expert, but that's my experience of a couple of case studies that I've seen for Pennsylvania.
Okay, I see Lisa and Steve and maybe Corinne have their hands up. What I'd like to do is put up a couple of closing slides and stop the recording, and then we can continue to talk as long as you guys have questions, okay? Okay, so that's on me. Oops. All right, so just to wrap up, here are some contact information. If anybody wants to get in touch with the chapter conservation teams, go to the Sierra Club Pennsylvania page. There's a menu at the top to click on conservation teams, and find your local group. You can see a map of where our groups are divided across the state, and there's a map and ways to get to the web pages for your local group. And then Sierra Club speakers today, here are the email addresses for Kelsey and Emily. And I think I have one more. Oh, so upcoming meetings, the Dirty Energy team meets every other month on the fourth Wednesday. So we've got a meeting coming up next week, next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. Geodelphia team are relentless. They meet every week, Tuesday nights. Contact Emily if you want to get a invite to their team meeting. And the Clean Energy for All program is every other month on the fourth Wednesday, and they will be having a program in April 26th. Melissa Farr, if you're on, if you want to give a plug for what that topic will be real quick.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so our topic for that session is going to be hydrogen. So if you're interested in learning more about the complex issues and advocacy related to everything hydrogen, I hope you will join us on the 26th. I will put the link to that in the chat. I'm also putting in links to register for the Dirty Energy team meeting, as well as a volunteer interest form if anyone wants to, sign up to volunteer with us at Sierra Club. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Melissa. Probably found out about this meeting through the volunteer program we had. So just thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. The link at the bottom there is to the main Pennsylvania page, which also has our calendar of outings and meetings and all kinds and programs and all kinds of just good stuff. So with that, I'm gonna stop the recording. Where's that?